Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Today on the show, I have a tribute episode for Adam Yungbluth, who passed away in his home in Morehead, Kentucky just a few weeks ago. Adam was a generous teacher, husband, and maker who was always ready to laugh. You're going to hear in this episode his love of comedy podcasts that he shared with his wife, Melissa. This interview centered around their time at the St. Petersburg Clay Company, where he was an owner that later transitioned into the Mauryan Center for Clay, and they were a part of that organization as well for quite a few years. The Yungbluths later moved to Kentucky, where Adam was a visiting assistant professor at Morehead State University. The school has set up the Adam Yungbluth Memorial Scholarship Fund in Adam's honor, and you can make a donation at the link that will be in the show notes. That's fitting for Adam, as he was willing to teach at any time. If you wanted to learn how to throw, you could learn that from him. If you wanted to learn how to fire a big old Onagama wood kiln, he could teach you how to do that. And if you wanted to learn how to barbecue, he also was very good at that as well. He was always ready to show up with a smile on his face and an open heart, and that's one of the things I'll miss the most about him. This episode is a re-airing of the 2016 interview I did with Adam and his wife, Melissa. So without further ado, we'll get on to the interview. Let's start with you guys talking about how you got to St. Pete, because you've moved around a good bit.
So I started at the St. Petersburg Clay Company as a artist in resident in 2009. I had just left. We both had just left Mississippi, Oxford, Mississippi, where the University of Mississippi is.
Ole Miss.
Ole Miss. Hotty toddy.
Nobody knows University of Mississippi. Everybody knows.
I say that
Everybody
to people,
knows
and
Ole
they just
Miss.
look at me like, "Where is that?" Like it's exotic, and then I go, "Oh, it's Ole Miss." They're like, "Oh, okay."
Oh yeah, okay, that's different.
But yeah, so I left graduate school, and we came down here. Melissa finished a year ahead of me, and I had been down here once before. It's kind of how I got accepted into the program as a resident. I mean, I did the official application, but the winter term we came down. Matt Long, the professor there, organized a 2-week intercession class where we came down, and in the span of 2 weeks, we fired the train kiln twice and rebuilt their soda kiln. So at the end of that, they're like, "Oh, you're getting ready to graduate. You know, if you need an opportunity after this, you should really consider us." And that's how I got to know a lot of the people around here initially, and it's turned into a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we bought a house and we stayed and would like to stay here, hopefully. But yeah, we ended up here because the year that we left school was the bubble bursting in the economy. You know, we were obviously both applying for jobs at the same time, and this was the opportunity that was the best that we were given. So it's like, all right, well, we're moving to Florida. We're moving to Spring Break Central. My students were really excited when I told them where I was moving. So,
Do you guys mind talking about how many jobs you applied for that cycle?
I don't even know.
It was, I think I applied for close to 30.
Yeah, probably around the same.
I think because I was applying for ceramic sculpture and 3D and some just general foundations.
And I was doing printmaking, graphic design, foundations, and curatorial applications.
And the worst thing that happened with it was the not getting rejection saying that we found someone else. It was the rejection of there's no funding for this program now. It might come back in a couple years. It might not.
But we're cutting this program.
Because I feel like this is your guys' story is very typical of our generation.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
People finishing school and then there being like 3 jobs throughout the whole country that actually hire. And then I mean, I guess because you can do graphic design and some other things, the pool's slightly bigger maybe.
Maybe, but graphic design is really competitive. you think about the numbers when you go into an arts program, where are most of the majors? Like 75% of them are in graphic design. So even though there's more jobs, there's more people trying to get those jobs as well.
The math of that, like you put out 40 applications between the two of you, or maybe 60, and then you get maybe one interview and, one suggestion that you should apply somewhere else. Like, that's actually, mathematically, that's all right. But personally, I would imagine that is crushing.
Oh, it was really crushing. It was heartbreaking.
It was hard.
Yeah. And then to move here, and he was the one with the opportunity. And that year we got to St. Pete, and, I tried to quickly make my way around. It's a small town. You got to know people here. And so that was a rough first year, trying to just get to know people and get them to trust me and know that I could have some skills to offer up to their jobs. So, and things were shut down when we moved here too. I mean, I went in with resumes in my hands to some of the galleries and museums, and they just said, no, we're frozen. We have no money.
Between the economy, and it was either the first summer we were here or the second was when the BP oil spill happened, which for St. Pete, it's a major tourist town in the whole Tampa Bay, Clearwater kind of region. And nothing actually oil-wise came down this far, but I think there was just the perception that the entire Gulf Coast was covered in oil. So museums and art centers were just like on a huge freeze because of that as well, because they didn't have anywhere near the traffic they had.
We lost billions in tourism, I think billions.
That makes sense why the investment the last couple years has been more, because it's been a boomerang. Like it tanked, and then when it started to come back, which would have been like 2012 or something.
I think in the last 2 years, we've seen people come back and our numbers increase in sales.
Can you guys talk about St. Pete? It's a quirky little town that's cooler than it should be.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
If it's not cool, we should leave.
Yeah, right. So before we got here, kind of pretty much its history up until the 2000, maybe even towards 10 or 11, like the nickname of it was Heaven's Waiting Room, because it was a huge retirement population that came down, and you just wanted to have a good time and not be cold, basically. A lot of people from the Northeast. I think most of the people you meet are from Ohio or
New York
or the New England
Pennsylvania
area. There's a lot of that was like the community was kind of that older retired community that really stayed a lot to the beaches and the things like that. And the downtown area was in a really bad way, kind of a regression because of the economy and everything. Yeah, like there was kind of the main area down by the bay where there was the big fancy restaurants where the museums are and things like that. That was still kind of thriving, and there were kind of clubby bars that were okay, but there was kind of a 7-block walk from that area to where the main Mauryan Art Center is, where Melissa works, that was like vacant buildings, vacant storefronts, and just like, during the day you could walk around, but at night it was a little sketchy. Nothing would probably happen, but you could just feel a little uneasy. But yeah, slowly, and I think it was kind of like what we were talking about with the jobs, and kind of talking about with like how podcasting, like you have to make your own opportunity sometimes. So there's a lot of younger people who were not necessarily in the arts, but they were having that same problem of finding the right opportunity. So they just started creating their own. So there's all these storefronts that were vacant for years, dropped their rent substantially so that people could afford them and open up their own little boutiques or little restaurants. And that's really helped kind of energize St. Pete from like a younger culture standpoint.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I mean, we got lucky. We didn't know that this was going to happen when we got here, but the year that we got here is when people had to make their own businesses, and they were all our age, like in their 30s and 40s, the young professionals. And it's fantastic just to know that the street away from where I work was empty, and now there's just boutique and breweries everywhere. I think we've got upwards of 10 breweries in this town now. We just had 2 open.
Like 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we just had 2 open like a month ago. It's awesome. They're really embracing people our age, which is fantastic.
And there seems to be a visual culture here too. I mean, beyond like sort of the typical Florida visual culture, but there's tons of murals here. There's a lot of outdoor art. It seems like that. Well, maybe you guys know, like, how did the mural tendency, how did that happen?
So that actually started with my boss. This is going to be a funny story, so I'm going to tell it because she'll be mortified. But
Who's your boss?
Amanda Cooper, curator of exhibitions at the Mauryan Art Center. Right when I was getting hired on, she was on leave for having her third kid. And she was bedridden, so she watched a lot of movies on Netflix, and she watched Exit Through the Gift Shop. Yeah.
About Banksy. And so she got it in her mind, like, we have some really fantastic graffiti artists who live here, mural artists. And so she wanted to put on a show, and this was back in 2011, I believe, maybe 2012. But so we put on a show called Leave a Message. And we invited all of these local artists to come in and take over the galleries and do stuff directly on the wall, in addition to doing things on canvas and on paper, which was unheard of. And the show just went crazy. It welcomed in a lot of young artists into the galleries, which we really needed. When I got there, it was a lot of the same artists who'd been there forever, really well-loved, well-known people. So it was really totally badass to welcome in all of these graffiti artists. And like I said, it got so much media attention that people started wanting murals on their buildings. And now it's just exploded. I mean, last year we had the first actual mural festival that the city paid for and brought in from all over the United States and even out of the country, 12 really well-known graffiti artists to do things on the buildings. And if you go to where I work, our building is covered in murals, and it's great. And is that a yearly thing?
It's going to be.
So will they repaint them each year? Like
some
do
of
a
them.
Different...
Sometimes.
Yeah, there's a few that have already been repainted because it's just like so much a part of that culture to just have it be a short-term thing, like they almost expect it.
Yeah, people get upset about it, but the artists just say, it's what we do. Yeah, it's not weird.
And it seems like you would think that would be like an urban, like New York City, Chicago, like any of the big centers. St. Pete is maybe 250,000, or do you know? It's not huge.
No, it's not big.
Tampa is bigger, and it's across the bay. But to think that you would have this street art festival supported by the town, I mean, that's what makes, I think, this area unique, is that arts is getting some traction as a cultural entity. And the idea that you guys had a show at the Mauryan, and then a couple of years later, this springs out of it, that is as successful as you can be for an art center.
Absolutely. It's so much fun every single year now to work on this project, and it's mostly really fun to have them come into the gallery and give them a wall and just watch them go to town for the next few hours.
And there's also a great like sign painting and neon tradition here. The good thing about towns that go through economic hard times is people usually don't replace older things. They just leave them. So I was just taking a picture the other day of the liquors sign down where it has the full globe.
Oh, yeah.
That one that's downtown. It's massive. It's awesome. It's like a 3-dimensional globe that at one time probably would spin.
I would imagine so. That place is... Yeah, I mean, St. Pete really embraces history, which is awesome. I think it's perfect for people working in clay because that's our natural tendency to embrace history. So yeah, it's the sign revitalization is everywhere. And we're a craft town too. We always win awards for being, number one mid-sized city for craft art and
it's interesting, the word craft here has a couple meanings, not only what we do, but the arts and crafts movement, like the bungalows that were built here in the 20s and 30s or probably maybe even earlier, are like at this point are now getting refurbished, and you can just drive through these neighborhoods and it's amazing.
The neighborhood we live in is called Historic Kenwood, and it's one of the older ones in the city, and it's where all the craftsmen, and our bungalow is 100 years old. And
I live in also an arts and crafts home in California, so the aesthetic and the woodwork, all of that is like, oh, this looks familiar.
It's nice. It's nice to have that history and wonder what happened here in the past.
Let's switch gears and talk about the Mauryan Art Center before we talk about the Mauryan Center for Clay. You're the assistant curator there. Can you talk about how that center came to be where it is?
I'll try my best to do a history on it. It turns 100 in 2017. So right now, everything that we're programming and we're a nonprofit art center. Everything that we're programming is towards a 100-year anniversary. So in 2017, we're going to have a lot of spin-off shows. So we're going to have one show where we're inviting back 100 artists from the past 100 years. And then like the clay show I'm taking an old clay show that happened in the 90s and I'm doing a new spin on that, but also inviting some of the old artists to be in that as well. So that's a really exciting year for the 100. But we started out, we've had 4 different names, I think. The Arts Club of St. Petersburg, the Arts Club, the Arts Center, and then now we're the Mauryan Arts Center. And yeah, I've been there for about 5 years doing the assistant curatorial job.
First, before we get to that, because I do want to talk more about that, the building is 4 or 5 stories tall?
No, we're a 3-story tall building. Yeah, and is that our second or third location? Third, because we used to be down by the MFA we used to be down by the MFA on the waterfront back in like 1915, 1930s, like upwards of there. Around the 1950s, we moved downtown into a tiny building. And then this one that we're in now, which has really stunning galleries, I think. We moved in 1999.
It feels like the centerpiece is the galleries, that's what you're going to see first. But you guys offer classes in painting, photography.
Everything. We have glass classes. We have a really fantastic jewelry and small metals program. And then painting, drawing, printmaking, digital arts. And then we have a huge summer camp program that we do every single year.
In terms of nonprofit art centers, you can go very specific and just be a one media center. And usually those, you don't always have to have a higher population, but it helps if you do, because then just the numbers of it, you'll have enough people that want to specialize in, say, clay work. But then we're in a smaller town or a smaller city, and so you guys have gone broad. And so you can bring in people and really be an arts hub in the truest sense. Like, all things run through you guys. People come take classes, then they are more educated. They go out and they buy more art. They become makers. It's like it's a cultural engine.
And we offer everything from a try it out kind of class, like go in for an hour at the location where Adam works and throw a pot, and some of those people end up staying and becoming students for a long time and then even members. And then we have that with our glass program as well, where you come in and you have a one-on-one 1-hour session with one of our on-staff glass blowers. And we had one girl who's actually now on staff, and she started out doing that, and then she assisted David Spurgeon's his name, and then she became his assistant, and now she does demos by herself. So yeah, it's cool to watch those kinds of things happen. And we have everything. I mean, we've got the hobbyists, which is fantastic to work with, and we're big, but we're small. Like, we know every single one of our teachers, and on Thursday afternoons, I know it's Karen Baker's painting class, and Walter the dog will be there, and I have to go and say hi to Walter and give him a biscuit. So we have that, and I really love that. To me, that's like the truest sense of art community, is I know that Walter's there, and I can go. You know what I mean? It sounds cheesy, but that's my favorite part about working in a community art center.
Well, I think it's important, too, not just for the personal interaction, but what that does for a community that is or has been retirement-based, to then get younger people, because you guys have student classes, you have people of all ages coming in. And Florida is a weird spot, because you have true Floridians, like what they used to call like a Florida cracker, which is actually based on the architecture. It's not like a derogatory.
But it's derogatory now. We don't call people that.
But it was a style of building where you build a house all the way up off the ground, because in Gainesville we had that. So you've got that, which is like old school Florida. But then you have so many people migrating down from the north, the snowbirds like you guys talked about. And what can happen is that you have little communities that don't interact. You've got the like 80-year-old retirement community that's built for them, and then you've got the kids in the elementary schools, and they never cross. And in some ways, you guys are, the train station, metaphorically, like everything can come through you. And I think that the reason I'm talking about this is it's hard to quantify to politicians why art is so important, But this is one of the plethora of reasons, is that cross-generational interaction and what art can do in this community.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few students and members that they're third generation. So grandma is still taking painting. Son took painting and took summer camp, and now his kids are in our summer camp. And that's awesome to see too. And son is now a doctor and gets the classes for mom so she can continue to take painting classes. And
that to me is success. Like working in art centers, like what you're saying, like this is the ultimate goal. So talk about the Chihuly Collection. How does that fit into Mauryan, the bigger Mauryan?
So the Chihuly Collection it's down closer to the water, down by where some of the we have a Museum of Fine Arts and the Dali Museum they're all kind of like in a one street down by the water. And the Chihuly Collection was brought in to help fundraise, basically. It's, everybody knows who Dale Chihuly is, and we have a large, like we're saying, like there's a huge tourist community that comes down, especially internationally. And so to have something like Dale Chihuly as a part of the Mauryan Center, people are going to instantly go there because they know his name, they want to see his work, they've seen it in magazines maybe, or at hotels, or all over the place because it's everywhere. So that was brought in to really just kind of help add a little bit of sustainability to the rest of the art center.
yeah, I should say that my galleries are free to the public 7 days a week. So that helps us to stay free to the public, which is really an important thing.
And then the Chihuly Collection, is that a ticketed event?
It is.
So that is sort of the funding source.
One of the funding sources. It's that, and it's our educational program that is the funding source that keeps our doors open and allows me to be free to the public.
I like that model that you have one collection that's going to help pay the bills, especially for Chihuly, because it's very accessible art. It's colorful glass. Like you can not be an art lover and love Dale Chihuly.
I mean, I see it helping the ceramics community too, because there's a gift shop over there and people get out of there and they can't afford a Dale Chihuly because, a small one that's the size of a cup is like $2,500. But we can sell pots over there that are colorful and people eat it up. So it's been a really nice relationship for that.
In terms of what you do as one of the curators there, how do you build exhibitions that support the whole center? Because it seems like your interests are in ceramics, graphic design, like you've got your interests, and I'm sure the other curator has her interest, but how do you make a broad-based exhibition program?
Yeah, she and I are absolutely balanced. Mine love is in craft. I mean, there's the graphic design, but that does not usually make for a great, exciting exhibition. There'll be elements of that in it, but mine is really craft focused, and her background is in art history, but also in painting and drawing in more of like a serious figurative school kind of way. So we balance each other in that it's like, okay, Amanda, we haven't had a jewelry show in 4 years. Let's think about a jewelry show. Or she'll say, well, we need to think about a photography show. But we basically have a rough schedule. We know that because we're a community arts center, each year we have to have a student instructor show, and we need to have 2 members exhibitions because people pay for a membership, so they need to get stuff out of it. And again, that's what we do. That's our motto is, connecting the community with art, and that's, that fits into the mold. And then we also like to have a balance. So you'll always see at least one show of national artists going on at the same time as we have a show with 1 or 2 or even a collective of local artists. So there's always a balance that we have to think about. And within that, we can plug in with people that are, like the dream for us to show.
It's interesting to think about that. Is like, I feel like all the little tips and tricks you're talking about today are, if people want to start an art center, they should just follow what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's a rubric for sure. And it's really helpful to us because we'll say, this artist who's local, we've never shown them, and her work is really exciting and it's about narrative. And here's the narrative that she talks about. So maybe the other galleries need to be a national artist or 2, but still narrative so that it goes together somehow. Like right now, we've got the mentors show up, and the show coinciding with it is our student instructor show. So every room in our galleries, we have 5 galleries to curate every 2 months. Sometimes a show can span more than one gallery, sometimes it does not. And so sometimes we get to think about programming 5 separate exhibitions, and that's really exciting. But there's a theme right now that's based on mentorship in all of the galleries.
Can you talk about the role model show that will go to NCECA?
Yeah, I'm really excited. So last year, we have a local collector and friend who came to me and said, I want you to propose a show to NCECA that's Florida-centric. And so I was like, okay, well, the theme is mentors, makers, and milestones, and you're supposed to create within the theme of NCECA. So we went with the mentors route because, I mean, makers is inherent. Like, everybody in a clay show is going to be a maker. That's obvious. So it's built in. And then I just figured milestones would start popping up, and it has in the storytelling aspect. And we're an educational facility, so we always like to have some type of storytelling or educational aspect to all of our exhibitions. So it ended up being, after a lot of conversations, choosing 17 artists in Florida and having them pick a mentor and a mentee of their own. So it was a really cool experiment for me for giving up control on exactly who was going to be in the show. But I mean, all gems came out of that. I'm not going to lie. I'm like grinning ear to ear. I'm stoked about this show. And so it was picked up by the Belger Art Center. Right now it's split up between my gallery and Florida Craft Art, which is a craft gallery about 4 blocks away from where I work. And we partner up with them quite often. A lot of the arts places here partner up all the time. And I'm packing it. I packed half of it yesterday, and then I'm packing the other half as soon as we're finished here. And Adam and I are driving it up to the Belger Art Center in Kansas City on Wednesday to install next weekend, and it'll be running for NCECA alongside like 3 or 4 other really amazing shows.
It's called Role Models?
It's called Role Models, yeah, and there's about 50 artists in it. So it's been really fun, and we've gotten to meet some people out of the show, which is always awesome, and, you know, we'll get to NCECA, and I'm excited for all the ceramic people to be able to view this show.
Yeah, and there's some great work. Like, I was oogling the Ruggles and Rankin
Yeah, I know.
jar.
I'm going to fight you for that one.
I was trying to convince my wife that we should buy that, and I know that you guys were trying to convince each other that you should buy that because of the cost of it.
It's like we can go on a payment plan for the next 3 years of our lives to get this Ruggles and Rankin's jar, but...
In our community, there is such a lineage of makers. You know, like, that tends to be the way. Even in academia, we put almost an apprentice-like lineage on the way we talk about our teachers. So the show is so well-fitting for our community. And I think in NCECA it's going to be, you know, it's going to have a great impact to see
I hope so.
Florida-centered folks. Because Florida does get a little bit of short shrift when it comes to craft.
It does, and it blows my mind that it does because there are so many good makers living in Florida. It's in, like, you know, working for the Community Arts Center, I had to move here and immediately learn everything about Florida craft to be good at my job. And it's like, holy cow, all of these people live in Florida and it gets no credit. It's awesome.
People come here for the good living, and then they bring all their talents with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
It was not hard to pick out. It was hard to scale back all the artists. It was like, okay, whoa, you got to stop at 50 pieces. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the Clay Center and how that plays into the bigger Mauryan umbrella. Was it always St. Pete Clay? What was the original name?
Yeah, so the original name was St. Petersburg Clay Company. And it started in 1996 in a smaller location across town. And then somewhere in, I think, 1998 or 99, the building, the train station, it's a 1926 freight depot. That was purchased and renovated for the intent for it to be for St. Pete Clay, to be a massive ceramic studio. All of that was done for a few years, and then they built 4 kilns outside. They had Don Wrights and Brian Harper come in and build an anagama, a soda kiln, a salt kiln, and a train kiln in the span of 2 weeks. So there's still pictures of it. It's just like amazing to watch that much happen in 2 weeks. Couldn't even imagine it. Building a kiln alone in 2 weeks.
I know, an anagama of that size.
Exactly, yeah. It's a massive 23-foot long kiln. But yeah, so that was kind of in about 2000 when everything started moving over to the train station, and they had been working with High Water Clays in Asheville they were distributing their clay down here first, I think, and then once they moved to the bigger location, High Water actually opened up a branch in the building. And that was up until just a few years ago when they needed to move across town for a bigger warehouse space because they were getting so much kind of school. School was their big account down here, all the elementary and things like that. So they moved out, and a few years before that, in the, I guess 2010 when we first got here, was when the Chihuly Collection was opened up. And part of his deal of allowing that to happen was that the Mauryan needed to have a hot shop to do demonstrations to help further educate the public on how he's creating what he creates. So where that is now at the main Mauryan Art Center is where the clay program used to be. And so they moved it over into a space in what's now the classrooms in the train station. And so the three of us worked together, the St. Pete Clay, High Water, and the Mauryan worked together for almost 3 or 4 years till High Water moved out, and then everything kind of went under the Mauryan Art Center blanket, and we became just the Mauryan Center for Clay.
Well, it's interesting that your personal history with it, too, because you were a resident, and then you and Matt Sheeman bought St. Pete Clay. Or what was the name that you bought? St. Pete Clay, right?
St. Petersburg Clay Company, yeah.
And so you guys were the owners for 3 years?
Just about 3 years, yeah. Maybe a little more.
And then also later sold it to the Mauryan. So you've done everything. you have come from the ground up. So I'd love to hear how your sense of responsibility and also probably your sense of being overwhelmed has changed from when you were a resident to an owner to now being the facilities director, and then also you're still a jack of all trades.
I thought you were going to call him a jackass.
Yeah.
Like, what?
I was like, all right, it just got real. So when I came in as a resident, I came in with a group of other people. Matt Sheeman was one of them at the time. Jared Gellermino.
Caleb
Zuhari. Danny Sigler. There's a bunch of us. Nicole, Paulina. All still in the clay world. And we, just like really all worked together to like put this energy in the studio to make things happen, which was a lot of fun at the time. Firing kilns together, making things together, because we were all in this one big kind of space in the back that was kind of dirty.
That space was not big.
Okay, yeah, it was not big. It was kind of dirty. It was kind of gross. It was lit poorly, and there was no AC.
You got to know each other real fast.
But yeah, the responsibility level there as a resident at the time, which is kind of similar to what it is now still, is just that we would work a day for the studio, an 8-hour day in exchange for our space and material and firing discounts, and then we would help during workshops and gallery openings and things like that. And then when Matt and I took on the ownership of it, it was a really quick learning curve. And it was just pretty much anything can be responsible for when owning a business. It was all there, paying bills, giant gas bills, giant electricity bills because of all the kilns we have, and it's Florida, so there's AC running constantly. So just dealing with that and then learning how to deal with people was really the hardest factor. Because it's one of those things where the reason that what's happening there is happening there as the Mauryan now and as St. Pete Clay at that time was because we rent out studios to the public. And that was like the big key fundraising. That's where all of our money came from. And then some from firing and all that, but that was kind of a wash with the electricity and the gas bill. So it was really just trying to figure out how to deal with our members in a way that I wasn't being a jerk. Because like I came out of grad school and it's just like, oh, I've got an MFA. I know this, I know that. And
I don't think that's where it comes from. I think it's the fact that you and I are smart asses.
Well, yeah, that doesn't
sometimes that doesn't go over well with people of a certain age.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that you're a jerk. I don't know.
It's not what I was told, but that's all right.
It's a large membership. There's 30 rental members.
I think it's close to 40 right now. We have some private spaces that people are sharing, so that kind of doubles those areas.
And they have about a 10 by 10 space.
Most of them are 10 by 10. There's one that's 10 by 20. Everyone who is a member gets 24-hour access. They get little key cards to open the door and things like that and come and go as they please. And then we also have 2 community areas where there's some shelving that they can rent out. And then they all get displays to try and sell their work as well. That was kind of when they originally started and moved St. Pete Clay into the train station. It was to really not only give people a place to work, but give them the opportunity to sell their work to the community. So it kind of all stays in-house. You're not worried about shipping and things like that.
Because I feel like in administrative work, there has to be the proper balance of power and responsibility. So too much power, like you could say in administration, you want to be at the top because you have more decision-making ability. But then if you have so much responsibility that you can't sleep at night because there's just so much going on, then that's not practical either.
And then to try and make work on top of that. There was really small amounts of time for that.
Yeah, every day for a balance, watching him and Matt run that place they had to be able to see the big picture and the minute details every single day. And that's really hard for a lot of people. And, I think that they did that really well. Because you have to think, you have to have a 5-year plan, but also have the wherewithal of this tiny little glitch is happening in this kiln. So I have to, do that.
The plans that you guys made when you were the owners, have you been able, and in terms of the 5-year plan, the long-range planning, have you guys been able to continue that as you've merged back into the Mauryan?
I think so. I think there was, like any kind of merger, like there was a little weird transition here and there. Nothing major, nothing bad at all, but it was just like, when you go into anything, you think you're all on the same page and being, because the Mauryan's got a big board and their own administrative staff, and so we're all kind of under this, and what we think is great and what they think is great, and they're merging really well now, and it really didn't take much more than a few months for that to really transition into working well together.
And how do you see this changing going into the future? Because now the facilities, you guys are improving the facilities. Every time I come down, the facilities are getting better. You guys have invested in solar, right?
There was a plan for that at one point. I think there's still some talk about it, but I don't know where in the horizon it is.
Because is St. Pete a solar city?
No.
Not really. There's a few companies for it that are trying to make a push for it, and it would make sense because there's so much sunlight, but it hasn't really sunk in yet.
Because I know the green energy, depending on the politics of the state, there can be a lot of grants that can bring in green energy. And you guys are perfect in terms of the need for green energy because you're going to have the AC cost all year round. To say it's a train depot, people might not understand how big it is. Like it is a full train depot. Like it would be, do you know how the square footage of it is?
I just realized I should have looked that up because I have no idea.
It's massive.
It's thousands and thousands.
Thousands, yeah. It might be in like the 30,000 range. Or that sounds really high, so it might not be. Maybe the whole property is that big.
But it's like half a city block that's a building. And then the outdoor area with the kilns is 2 or 3 times bigger than that.
I can put it in a little bit of perspective for you. It's one of those things where when I go and pick him up after work, if I don't feel like circling the building several times, I will get my cell phone out and say, tell me what room in the building you're in. Because you can walk that building a half a dozen times looking for one person and never find them. It's that big.
Yeah, I don't have one of the Fitbits, but my phone, the iPhone has the step tracker, and I'll look at it sometimes, and it's just like, you're supposed to get like 10,000 a day. I think I'll be in like the 15,000.
A couple miles of walking a day in that building.
I feel like that this is, as I go around to art centers and visit places, even if the economy on paper is not as strong as it was in like, say, the .com bubble, the art center world that we all function and live in is growing in leaps and bounds.
Well, that's because artists are passionate people. We do it because it's for the passion of art.
Yeah, and there's been some really key investment, I think, from some people that we don't necessarily need to name, but there's been some benefactors here. And I'm also thinking in Kansas City at Red Star that when people go to NCECA, they should go to Red Star and see how massive that place is, and then come down here, see how massive this place is. Because I think there's a lot of art centers that are struggling. Either they have the clientele and not the space, or they have the space and not the clientele. It's like a very delicate balance. And you guys have really grown into what is a massive area here. And it's exciting to see. I mean, the students that come to the workshops that I'm a part of, every year they're getting better because they're working in their studios here. I can feel the momentum.
And I would like to say that we're sort of related to Red Star in a few different ways. The woman that you interviewed a while back, Evelyn Kraft, was the director of the Mauryan Art Center for a long time. Right before I got there, I would say maybe 2 years before I got there, she left and moved to Red Star and the Belger Art Center. So she really did a lot of foundation work for what the art center is now.
Yeah, I think she was responsible for moving into the new building the Art Center has now.
She did the new building, and she was there for the start of the idea of the Chihuly Collection, and she has taken all of that knowledge and brought it over to Red Star and the Belger Art Center, and she's over there now. And Tommy Frank, who I don't want to botch
Tommy
his,
Frank.
The Tommy Frank. I don't want to botch his job title. I don't really know what it is other than he does everything, I think. And he used to be a resident here when it was St. Pete Clay. So we have a lot of connection with Red Star and a really fantastic relationship with them.
In the art world, I feel like those connections, we are a literal network.
Totally. Ours is just really direct. I mean, she set us up, left us, and went up there and set them up.
Yeah, and I do want to plug that interview. If people haven't listened to that, her and also Sarah Milfelt from Northern Clay Center and also the former director of Northern Clay, their interviews, they literally give like a this is how you run an art center step-by-step thing. And I think sometimes people don't listen to those episodes because they don't quite relate to it. But man, Evelyn Kraft, if you can sit down with her and have a conversation, she is awesome. Like
She's
her
so
knowledge
smart.
of nonprofit is amazing.
It really is. And she's got a background in the arts and in ballet. So she knows ballet nonprofit as well and can bring some of that.
Well, let's switch gears altogether and talk about comedy. We're all three comedy dorks as well as like huge podcast fans. And we were going to do this interview last year when I came down, and I've been waiting all year to talk to people that love podcasts as much as I do. How did you guys get into listening to podcasts?
I think you got me into it.
Really? I was thinking about that last night, and I think you got me into it.
I have no idea.
I don't know. It started in grad school.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah.
And just in the studio, I was trying to figure out like the very first. I mean, I know the first podcast that I got into was This American Life, which is pretty typical, and I still listen to it this day. That is like religion for me, is listening to.
It's the gateway drug of podcasts.
I gotta listen to him. But yeah, we started with that, and then a couple other of the NPR. And so what was that, like 2005, 2006?
Just kind of weird because when you asked that, I had one of those like blanking moments, and it was just like, I don't remember a time when there wasn't podcasts.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, how did that? They were just always there.
Yeah. What was before that? Oh, music? What's that?
The radio?
Yeah. So it started with NPR shows because it was so cool to not have to wake up at a certain time on Sunday and listen to Wait, Don't Tell Me. Like I can listen to it whenever now on my computer. That's amazing. So it definitely started there. And then for me, I've just always had a thing for comedians and comedy. It's, it's laughter. It's fantastic. I get excited like you're here and we can talk about comedians. So then I found out that some comedians had podcasts. Like Mark Maron was the first one that I listened to, and I think that mostly everybody listened to. So him from the beginning, and I still listen to him as well. But now there's Nerdist Industries, which is like candy store for me. I was counting last night or this morning, and I think I have upwards of 25 podcasts that I listen to on a regular. So.
And I am the same way. Like we got to like get, in fact, I think last year I went through your phone to see what you were listening to. Yeah,
we did.
Because I wanted to see. I think if you're listening to this, obviously you know what a podcast is, but there's a generation gap. So I even start to tell people that are like 40 plus, like it's an internet radio show, so that they understand what it is. And then they instantly get it like, oh, radio show, I got it.
Yeah. It's a talkie.
It's a talkie, exactly.
Right?
But you guys are big fans of Doug Love Movies,
mm-hmm.
which is Doug Benson. Like, why don't you, one of you, describe what that show is?
It's a game show about movies, and he usually has other comedians. Actors will be on.
He's a comedian.
Yeah, he's a comedian. And so they just play games about movies, and the one that it's built around is the Leonard Maltin game, and that's where he tries to describe movies, and they have to. There's a couple versions of it where they either have to guess the title or name the actors and actresses that are a part of it. And they're smaller games, and
that one's been really fun because we've listened to that one from the very beginning. So we'll go back every now and then and listen to some old ones. That's one of the podcasts that I don't delete the episodes for. And we'll go back and listen to some of the old ones. He started out with one game for that podcast, and now there's at least a half a dozen. I don't know, maybe like 10 games. and it involves the audience. So this year we got to go, and Adam and
We've
I
been
actually
twice now. Yeah.
we've been twice now, and Adam and I actually participated, which was awesome.
That was so good. I remember you texting me like, hey, we're going to
so
be on this
excited.
week.
And then for the second year in a row, the sound got messed up, so you can't actually hear us, which is a total bummer. But I keep telling people, like, when he repeats the name Jamie Lee Curtis, that's me.
And it's funny because like the way the audience interaction, a lot of it happens is with Twitter. One of the games is Last Man Standing. And they go around in a circle, the contestants, and try and name all the movies from one actor, which sounds really easy, but I
It's
imagine
super
when you're on
hard.
stage, it's the hardest thing ever. And even listening to it, it's just like, surely this person wasn't in that many movies.
Yeah.
But so you tweet in that you have someone for this game, and hers was Jamie Lee Curtis, and then I think Tommy Lee Jones, because he does a comedy show one night and then the podcast taping the next night.
And we did a Halloween taping. He was here for Halloween this year, so everybody had to dress up. And so I got on Twitter and said, and I don't use my Twitter, I would like to say, like, don't look at it. It's only for Doug Loves Movies for the most part. You're going to read it and be like, what the hell is that? But I got on Twitter and said, I have a Halloween appropriate one. And so he chose me 2 nights in a row, which was so exciting as a total podcast nerd.
Let's talk about nerd culture. Because this is something after listening to Nerdist, which is Chris Hardwick. He has like the Nerdist empire. And really, I mean, a lot of what I've based my podcast around is Mark Maron's interview style, but Chris Hardwick's sense of business.
Yeah.
And trying to diversify and cover a lot of different topics.
Well, you're casual. You're not angry either.
Right. That helps.
I love Mark Maron, but, you know.
You might not have enough cats.
Nerd culture, exactly. The requisite 10 cats that have to come with being mad.
Boomer lives.
But how do you guys think nerd culture? Well, let me just speak from my own perspective. When I was a kid, there's all these things that I would like that weren't cool. So there's like you liked them, but you also kind of hid them. And now in our age, because of people like Chris Hardwick that founded this podcast empire and then sold Nerdist to Legendary Pictures and now is a multimillionaire, like he is a perfect example of taking something that was a subculture and realizing that, wait, it's actually not a subculture.
Yeah.
There are so many people that love whatever it is, whether it's gaming, comic books, like there's a whole spectrum of things. So how do you guys feel like that plays out here? Like, do you feel like you guys have a lot of friends that you can talk about podcasts with, or that you can talk about sort of those quirky interests that you have?
Sometimes the thing that I like the most that's come out of nerd culture, I'm not a gamer. We have a Wii. I haven't touched it in years, and that's the first system I've ever owned in my life. But there are other aspects of the nerd culture that are right up my alley. And so that is really nice because, yeah, growing up, I was a nerd. I was a loser. I was like the weirdo outcast art kid at a private school. So that was rough. So if Nerdist was around, it would have been a much easier childhood for me, I think. But that's my favorite part, I think, about the nerd culture is you can zone in on the nerd part that you relate to. But I mean, I think we're ceramic nerds for sure.
Oh yeah.
That's where we get real nerdy, is talking to other ceramic artists. Yeah, we have the friends that we call on about podcasts. Like I talked to you about, what are you listening to? Chandra and Tommy, constantly, they're podcast people, and they turn me on to some, and I try to turn them on to some. And, you know, we've gotten the artist residents into podcasting. So I feel like we're the ones that are trying to spread it around so that we can have those things in common with other people. And we do have some friends that are into comedians as well. But we've made friends going to Doug Loves Movies with a couple that live here in St. Pete, just because we constantly go to that. As soon as he's in town, it's like, oh, you two are here. Oh, okay, yeah. Good to see you. Let's sit together. We have that in common.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think it's the clay is where we get super, super nerdy.
I remember a couple years ago, I know what it was. It was maybe 10 years ago. A woman I was dating was saying, "You're really a clay nerd." And I was like, I didn't want to own that word. I was like, I'm not a nerd.
Yeah.
She's like, no, you're a nerd.
Yeah.
You should hear the way you talk to your friends about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
We're talking about like glaze chemistry and kiln building, all this stuff that's pretty specific that we're all zoned into that no one else cares at all about.
Not in the least.
Yeah, I have
no.
this problem at the studio where I'll do demonstrations for tours when they come in, or like show them around the kiln pad or things like that. And whenever I'm throwing, someone will be like, "Oh, where do you get your clay from?" And I'm just like, oh, this is going to take a long time, because I break down, like, it's like, well, this feldspar probably came from here, and there's ball clay here, and then they mix it all together, and there's just like, you can just see the eyes like glazing over. I'm just like, sorry guys. And it's like a 15-minute spiel. Yeah. They're just like, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
I feel like we need like a clay nerdist section on this podcast where I call someone and we talk about tech stuff just for 10 minutes, because that's about all that non-clay people can take.
It would definitely have to be a mini episode.
Yeah. Ben loves minis.
Yeah, exactly. So what podcast are you guys listening to these days? Just so people that are listening to this can think about new shows.
I haven't listened to any in a while. Like Melissa was saying, we're getting ready to drive.
For shame.
I know. Well, we're getting ready to drive to Kansas City 2 times in a row, basically, for Nsika again. So I'm just like, I don't want to listen to any right now, because it's going to be like an 18-hour car drive.
And I want to say for a while means like 2 or 3 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Let's clarify.
But there's one that I just saw, I was scrolling through mine earlier as well. It's on a hiatus now. What's called the Indoor Kids.
Oh yeah,
with
Kumail and
his
Emily.
wife Emily, yeah. And like, I was really into games as a kid, like the video games, and I play like the little phone ones now because they're a lot easier than the big ones that they do with the consoles now. But they talk about those and the old games, and so a lot of the games I don't know what they're talking about, but the way they talk about it is how we talk about clay. So it's really interesting to see that relationship happen.
And Kumail is on Silicon Valley.
Yes.
He is,
which is the best TV show.
It's so funny. But he's a great stand-up, too.
Oh, he's so funny.
And he'll be on the Doug Loves Movies as well, and is amazing on that.
And TJ Miller is on there, and he is like the love of my comedy life. That goes back to, I guess, like our being nerdy. We went and saw Deadpool, and I hadn't seen a preview for it, but it was going to be a movie that I was going to love, and he knew that. And he's like describing what Deadpool is. He's like vigilante, which is a great buzzword for me. I like vigilante stories, and he's describing it. And finally he says, and TJ Miller's in it. I'm like, oh shit. Well, why did you not start with that? Like, we will go if TJ Miller has even 5 seconds, because he's the funniest guy, and his laugh is more infectious than I think all laughter is, and it already is infectious. So, yeah.
So what are you listening to these days?
I listen to a range of everything. I have all the comedy ones on there that I really like. I was telling you before this that Sex with Emily is one that I discovered. It's only about a year old, but it's really funny, and it's about sex and relationships, but it touches on everything when you come to relationships. It's not just heterosexual, it's homosexual relationships and what happens in the bed, what happens out of the bed, stuff like that. But she's really funny because it's part of Nerdist. It's got to be funny. Freakonomics is probably my favorite.
That is so good.
I have dreams of being on Freakonomics. Even though I'm not an economist, I have not really anything to do with money or things like that. But, that's probably my favorite one. I love Freakonomics.
Didn't you find come up with a clay-centric episode?
No, an art-centric episode that I'm going to send him. Yeah, because they haven't touched on the fine arts. He did a musician recently episode, but he hasn't touched on the fine arts, so I'm going to send him a thing saying that he needs to talk about economics and fine arts and, how it drives a local economy for sure. And people don't always see that, so we need a fine arts episode on Freakonomics. I'm happy that Serial is back.
Oh, right. Season 2.
And I think it's really cool that it's a story that I'm familiar with. So I'm enjoying going through Serial.
Yeah, that's the Bo Bergdahl.
Yes. So I like Serial. I like all podcasts. Like I said, I got 25 of them on my phone.
I go through, I ebb and flow into comedy and back into science. Those are my 2. And right now I always listen to Pete Holmes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. You made it weird.
I love the theme song to that one. It is so catchy.
You will find yourself humming that theme song.
I do it all the time. I whistle it when I'm walking around the studio.
Yeah, and he does make it weird every time.
And he's had this series where he's interviewing people. Are you guys familiar with Ram Dass? But basically, it's a comedian interviewing people that are in the meditation / spiritual discipline world. And so it's a series that he's done along with the comedy interviews. and there's maybe 4 or 5 of them, and it's just hilarious to have someone that's deeply interested in meditation and spirituality, but they also will totally make a dick joke. It's like a really nice
Great
balance. So that's been happening lately. And then The Hidden Brain is one of NPR's new.
Oh, I don't know that one. Okay.
I cannot think of the guy's name. It's the social science correspondent for NPR. Like, you'll recognize his voice when he comes on.
The Hidden Brain?
Yeah, Shankar Vedantam, I think is his name. And he's like, sometimes he's on Marketplace talking about social science and economics. I mean, he's talking about all these things, but it's his podcast. And they explore the brain in terms of social science and human relations.
Oh, cool. I would like that.
Really good.
Okay.
So, got to check that out.
I will. I'm going to subscribe to that immediately. Yeah.
So to wrap up, can you guys tell how people can get in touch with you to talk more about either curating or also the residency? Can you plug the residency also?
Yeah, the residency deadline is April 15th. You can go to the website, MauryanArtsCenter.org, MorehadsCenter.org.
I didn't know you were going to spell out the whole thing.
You're welcome. So there's all the application material that you can find on that website. And if you're going to the NCCA in Kansas City, you can find on that same website Matt Sheeman's email address. Get in touch with him, and we'd love to talk to you about the program.
Maybe Adam would love to talk about the residency. You probably hear enough about the residency.
Yeah, you're telling me.
But it's 6 residents, and actually there's an episode with Matt about the residency,
he goes
so
into it really well.
They can listen to it. But it's six residents of the possibility of renewing a second year. Great facilities, great place to work. So, and then how about you for Mauryan?
For Mauryan Art Center, again, Morean, arts with an S, center.org. And it'd be melissa.yungbluth. So you can just shoot me an email there, or it's just melissayungbluth@gmail, Melissa Yungbluth on Instagram, and all those things. Just try to keep it really easy.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah,
Thanks.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's like a dream come true as a podcast nerd.
If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.